After 15 years in the police tactical unit, you learn to compartmentalize. The violence, the tension, the constant state of alertness. You keep it all separate from home life. That is why I chose Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago. The neat rows of houses with their manicured lawns represented everything my professional life was not: predictable, peaceful, ordinary. Morning sunlight filtered through mature oak trees as children played on the community playground. This particular Saturday began like any other when my niece Sarah visited. She was born with cerebral palsy, but her spirit remained unbroken by her physical limitations. Her laughter carried across the playground as I pushed her on the adapted swing set we had petitioned the homeowners association to install last year. The Oak Ridge HOA had always been strict but reasonable. They maintained property values without becoming tyrannical. The playground upgrades had required 6 months of committee meetings and proposal revisions, but eventually they approved the accessible equipment. That was before Patricia Winters took over as president. Sarah gripped the swing chains tightly, her arms straining against her body's natural resistance. "Higher, Uncle James. I want to go higher." Her joy was contagious, and for those moments I was not Lieutenant James Marshall of the police tactical response team. I was just Uncle James, whose biggest responsibility was making sure his niece felt the exhilaration of flight while remaining safe. My wife Lisa sat on a nearby bench, taking photos that would inevitably become part of our growing collection. We had no children of our own yet, but Sarah filled our weekends with the kind of chaos that made a house feel like a home. Her overnight visits were the highlight of our month. Mrs. Davidson from 3 houses down walked past with her terrier. "Beautiful day, James." She glanced nervously over her shoulder toward the clubhouse. "Though you might want to check your mailbox. I heard Patricia is sending out violation notices for grass length again. Apparently, anything over 4¼ inches is now subject to immediate fines." This was the third neighbor this week to mention Patricia's increasingly stringent enforcement. Rumors circulated about her neighborhood improvement plan that seemed more focused on pushing out certain residents than actual improvements. Last month, the Rodriguez family received daily citations for their vegetable garden, despite it being within previous HOA guidelines. "Thanks for the heads up," I replied, making a mental note to mow the lawn that afternoon. My professional training taught me to observe situations before passing judgment. Perhaps Patricia was simply overzealous rather than malicious. Either way, HOA politics ranked low on my list of concerns. Sarah's laughter pulled me back to the present as she reached the apex of her swing. Her face glowed with pure joy, her physical challenges momentarily forgotten in the simple pleasure of movement. Lisa captured the moment on her phone, the 3 of us existing in perfect harmony. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. The specific pattern told me everything I needed to know before I even looked at the screen. Work. The tactical unit was being called in. I recognized the address immediately, a hostage situation at the downtown bank branch. "I have to go," I told Lisa, already shifting into professional mode. I kissed Sarah on the forehead and squeezed Lisa's hand. "I will be back before dinner." How could I have known what would unfold in my absence? That this ordinary Saturday would become the dividing line between peace and chaos. As I drove away, I caught a final glimpse of Sarah in the rearview mirror, still swinging, still laughing. The image would haunt me in the hours to come. The hostage situation resolved without casualties, a successful operation by any metric. As I drove home, I allowed the professional tension to slowly dissipate from my body. My phone showed 6 missed calls from Lisa. Not unusual during a tactical operation, as I could not answer while engaged. but something about the timing seemed off. The last call came just 20 minutes ago. I dialed her number. No answer. An unfamiliar uneasiness settled in my stomach as I pressed the accelerator slightly harder. When I turned onto our street, I immediately spotted Lisa's car in the driveway, parked at an odd angle, as if abandoned in haste. The front door stood partially open. "Lisa," I called out as I entered the house. The silence amplified my concern. Then I heard footsteps rushing down the stairs. Lisa appeared, mascara streaked down her face, eyes red and swollen from crying. My tactical training kicked in automatically: assess, evaluate, respond. "Sarah is in the hospital," she managed between broken sobs. "That woman, that horrible woman." The world narrowed to a single point of focus. What woman? What happened to Sarah? Lisa collapsed. Ed into my arms, her body shaking. "Patricia Winters, the HOA president, she hurt Sarah at the playground. James, she nailed her hands to the equipment." My mind refused to process the information. The words existed but made no sense in that specific arrangement. Nailed her hands to the playground equipment. "Start from the beginning," I said, my voice taking on the mechanical calm I used during hostage negotiations. Inside, a storm was brewing. Lisa wiped her eyes, struggling to compose herself. "After you left, Sarah wanted to try the regular monkey bars, not just the adaptive equipment. I was helping her, standing right behind her for support. Then Patricia showed up. She started yelling that the regular equipment was not for children like Sarah." Those were her exact words. My jaw clenched involuntarily. Lisa continued, the story coming in painful fragments. "I told her Sarah had every right to use any part of the playground. Patricia said disabled children visible in common areas lowered property values, that the adaptive equipment was already an eyesore, but at least kept them separate." Lisa's voice cracked. "Sarah told Patricia she was being mean. That is all she said, James. Just that Patricia was being mean." A cold sensation spread through my body. And then Patricia went to her car and came back with a toolbox. I thought she was going to work on something nearby. Sarah was still on the monkey bars, refusing to get down. I was about to lift her off when Patricia pushed me aside. It happened so fast. She grabbed Sarah's wrist and she had a hammer and nails. Lisa's words dissolved into sobs. The image formed with horrific clarity. She nailed Sarah's hands to the wooden part of the equipment. Lisa nodded, unable to speak. I pictured it all: the hammer, the nails, my niece's hands pinned against the wood, blood dripping onto the playground chips below. The tactical officer in me noted the precise nature of the assault. The uncle in me wanted to tear Patricia Winters apart with my bare hands. "Other parents were there," Lisa finally continued. "They stood frozen. Patricia kept saying this would teach the lesson that rules needed to be followed, that special needs children had their own equipment for a reason. When she finished, she told everyone present this was what happened when people ignored HOA regulations." "How did Sarah get free?" Mr. Chen from the end of the block finally intervened. He physically restrained Patricia while his wife called 911. I was trying to comfort Sarah. She was screaming, James. I have never heard her scream like that. The neighbors had witnessed this atrocity and initially done nothing. Fear of authority, a phenomenon I had observed countless times in my professional career, had temporarily paralyzed them. But why had no one called me directly? "The ambulance arrived quickly," Lisa continued. "I tried calling you, but you were still in the operation. The hospital called just before you got home. Sarah is stable, but they want to keep her overnight." My training in crisis management fought against the primal rage building inside me. Throughout my career, I had maintained control in the most volatile situations. I had negotiated with armed criminals, talked down suicide attempts, and diffused potential mass casualty events. But this was different. This was Sarah. Which hospital? My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. Mercy General. James, there is something else. Patricia is claiming Sarah was vandalizing the equipment and she was making a citizen's arrest. Of course she would construct a defense. Perpetrators always did. In 15 years of tactical response, I had never encountered a criminal who believed themselves unjustified in their actions. As we drove to the hospital, my mind processed the situation with cold efficiency. Patricia Winters had assaulted a disabled child, my niece, in broad daylight in front of witnesses. She had used carpentry nails to physically restrain a 10-year-old girl with cerebral palsy to playground equipment. In my professional capacity, I had hunted terrorists, negotiated with hostage takers, and confronted armed suspects. But nothing had prepared me for this violation that struck at the heart of my family. I felt something dangerous awakening inside me, the very instinct I had spent years learning to control in my professional life, the drive to respond with overwhelming force against threats. As we parked at the hospital, I made a silent promise. Patricia Winters would face justice through every legal channel available and beyond. The fluorescent hospital lights cast an unnatural pallor over everything. Sarah lay in the pediatric bed, her small hands bandaged, her eyes vacant. The doctor had explained that the physical wounds would heal without permanent damage, small puncture wounds through the fleshy parts of her palms, carefully cleaned and dressed. The psychological trauma was another matter entirely. Sarah had not spoken since arriving at the hospital. Not to the doctors, not to Lisa, not even to me. She stared at the ceiling, flinching visibly whenever anyone approached her hands. The pediatric psychologist used terms like acute stress response and potential post-traumatic stress disorder. Clinical language to describe what was plainly evident. My niece had been brutalized, and part of her light had been extinguished. Officer Ramirez, a patrol officer I knew from the department, took the initial report. The respect in his eyes was evident, not just professional courtesy, but genuine outrage on behalf of a fellow officer's family member. "Lieutenant Marshal, we are treating this with the utmost seriousness," he assured me, his notebook open. "Multiple witnesses have provided statements already. The suspect has been questioned but released pending charges." Released. The word escaped before I could contain it. Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. "She has no prior criminal record, and the DA wants to ensure the charges are properly structured. They are considering assault on a minor, unlawful restraint, possibly hate crime elements related to disability discrimination." I understood the process, of course. The system moved methodically, not emotionally. Patricia Winters had already secured legal representation, according to Ramirez. Her initial statement claimed Sarah had been damaging HOA property, and she was preventing further destruction through citizen detention. The absurdity of the claim would have been laughable if not for the bandaged hands of my niece a few feet away. When Ramirez left, I stepped into the hallway and called Detective Garcia from Major Crimes, a colleague I had worked with on multiple tactical operations. "Michael, I need information on Patricia Winters. Anything you can get me." "I heard what happened, James. Everyone at the department is talking about it. This is personal for all of us." His voice hardened with professional determination. "I will pull everything I can. Court records, financial history, prior complaints. Give me a few hours." I returned to Sarah's room where Lisa sat beside the bed, gently stroking our niece's hair, careful to avoid any movement that might appear threatening to her hands. The pediatrician had administered mild sedatives to help Sarah sleep. As her breathing settled into a regular rhythm, I made another call. Marcus Wilson, an HOA board member who had supported our playground adaptation proposal last year, answered on the second ring. His response to my questions about Patricia's actions was disturbing in its tepidness. "It is a terrible situation, James, truly awful," he said, his voice betraying discomfort. "Patricia can be overzealous about property values and rule enforcement. The board will certainly review the incident." "Overzealous," I repeated, keeping my voice measured. "Marcus, she drove nails through a disabled child's hands. This goes far beyond overzealous." His response was telling. "Patricia has been under a lot of pressure lately. Property values in the East section dropped last quarter, and she takes these things personally." The implication was clear. The board might not fully condemn Patricia's actions. The system, both legal and community, might not deliver the justice Sarah deserved. As a tactical officer, I was trained to recognize when standard approaches would prove insufficient. By evening, Garcia called back with preliminary findings. "Patricia Winters has a pattern, James. No criminal record, but plenty of civil complaints. 3 harassment allegations dropped before filing. Multiple cease and desist letters from previous neighborhoods where she lived." "Target pattern?" I asked, slipping into tactical terminology. "Consistent. Elderly residents, minority families, households with visible disabilities or medical equipment. Anyone she considers detrimental to neighborhood aesthetics. 7 families have left Oak Ridge Estates since she became president 6 months ago, all fitting the same demographic profile." Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera had captured parts of the incident. The video showed Patricia's deliberate actions, her calm demeanor as she retrieved the toolbox, the methodical way she positioned Sarah's hands against the wooden structure. This was not an impulsive act. This was calculated cruelty. As Sarah finally slept, medication dulling her pain, I sat in the hospital chair making notes. My tactical training included intelligence gathering, evidence assessment, and strategic planning. Those skills would serve a different purpose now. This was no longer just about one terrible incident. Patricia Winters had revealed herself as a predator who targeted the vulnerable in our community. The system might deliver justice, but I realized something more permanent was required. The tactical officer in me recognized the mission parameters with perfect clarity: evidence collection, alliance building, strategic pressure points, and controlled escalation. This was not about revenge. It was about comprehensive justice and community protection. As I watched Sarah's chest rise and fall with each breath, I made my decision. Patricia Winters had no idea who she had chosen as an opponent. District Attorney Helen Morales reviewed the medical reports spread across her desk, her expression grim. 20 years of friendship meant she spoke candidly. "Assault on a minor, unlawful restraint, possibly hate crime charges related to disability discrimination," she said, tapping her pen against the file. "The evidence is compelling, James. Multiple witnesses, medical documentation, even partial video footage. But her defense will claim temporary insanity or diminished capacity. They always do in cases this egregious." I sat across from her, maintaining the professional demeanor that had served me through countless tactical operations. Timeline: preliminary hearing in 3 weeks. Full trial could be 6 months out, assuming no continuances. She leaned forward. "You know how the system works, James. It is slow, deliberate." "While Patricia Winters remains free in the community," I finished her thought. Helen nodded reluctantly. There is no prior criminal record to justify preventive detention. The restraining order keeps her away from Sarah and your immediate family, but she remains in her position at the HOA. The justice system wheels turned slowly, but I had other machinery in motion. I thanked Helen and drove to my next appointment, the first of many intelligence-gathering operations I had organized over the past week since the incident. The Rodriguez family welcomed me into their modest home at the east end of the neighborhood. Maria Rodriguez poured coffee, while her husband Carlos described their experiences. "It started with warnings about our garden," Carlos explained, spreading photographs across the kitchen table. "Traditional plants from our homeland. Patricia called them foreign weeds and cited HOA regulations about approved vegetation. Then came daily inspections," Maria continued, "measuring our grass with a ruler, photographing our children's bicycles if they were left out for even 10 minutes. The fines accumulated so quickly we could not pay them all." Their story matched what I had already documented from other residents. The Chen family received violation notices for excessive cooking odors from traditional Chinese meals. Elderly Mr. Patel faced harassment over religious decorations during Diwali. The Johnsons, an African-American family, found their children suddenly excluded from community pool access over paperwork discrepancies. 7 families had left the neighborhood in the 6 months since Patricia became president, all minorities or households with members who had visible disabilities or medical needs. Former residents described coordinated harassment campaigns, selective rule enforcement, anonymous threatening notes. The elderly couple at the corner house, the Williamsons, showed me daily photographs of tape measures against their grass. "Violation notices for being 1/8 inch above regulation height," Mr. Williamson explained, his hands trembling with age and indignation. "Weekly fines of $150. On a fixed income, Lieutenant Marshal, what choice did we have but to comply?" I documented everything methodically: statements, photographs, violation notices, comparative evidence showing similar issues ignored at other properties. The tactical officer in me recognized the value of comprehensive intelligence gathering before action. 3 days after Sarah returned home from the hospital, I encountered Patricia Winters at the community mailboxes. She sorted through envelopes with manicured fingers, her posture perfect, her expensive clothing immaculate. When she noticed me, she did not flinch or show remorse. Her eyes met mine without a flicker of emotion. "Your niece should not have been using facilities not designed for her kind," she said, as if discussing the weather forecast. "The property values affect us all. Some sacrifices must be made for the greater good of the community." The casual cruelty, the utter lack of remorse, these confirmed what my investigation had already suggested. Patricia Winters was not someone who had made a terrible mistake in a moment of passion. She was a calculated predator who saw certain community members as obstacles to her vision of neighborhood perfection. That night, I began surveillance on Patricia's own property. The tactical officer in me recognized the value of identifying hypocrisy and leverage points. Over 3 evenings, I documented 17 separate HOA violations at her residence, the same regulations she weaponized against others. Her decorative water feature exceeded height restrictions by 14 inches. Her ornamental trees lacked proper approve. Al's, her husband's vintage car, remained parked in the driveway rather than the garage, violating the very rule she had used to find the Rodriguez family. I added these observations to my growing case file. At the hospital, Sarah had begun speaking again, but she woke screaming from nightmares. Her therapist reported regression in both physical and emotional development. The stakes were too high for conventional approaches alone. This was not revenge. This was strategic justice. Patricia Winters had declared war on the vulnerable members of our community. She had assaulted my niece. My tactical training had prepared me for precisely this type of asymmetric conflict, where the enemy held institutional power but operational weaknesses. As I organized my evidence files, I outlined my strategic approach: documentation of discrimination patterns, community alliance building, exposure of financial improprieties, and systematic dismantling of her power base. Patricia believed she was facing an angry relative with a badge. She had no idea she was facing a tactical response specialist with 15 years of experience neutralizing threats more dangerous than her. The confrontation was inevitable. The only question was when and under what circumstances it would occur. Like any tactical operation, timing would prove essential. Military and police tactical operations succeed through careful planning, coordinated execution, and disciplined patience. I approached the Patricia Winters situation with the same methodical precision I applied to hostage negotiations and armed suspect extractions. Phase 1: Comprehensive documentation and intelligence gathering. Every discriminatory action, every selective enforcement, every violation of HOA regulations that Patricia herself committed while punishing others, all cataloged and cross-referenced in a growing evidence file. I installed legal security cameras on my property that happened to capture the comings and goings at the HOA office. Patricia's schedule, her associates, her patterns of behavior, all valuable intelligence for the operation to come. Phase 2 involved community building. The neighborhood had been systematically fragmented by fear, but shared outrage creates unexpected alliances. I began with casual conversations at mailboxes, progressed to coffee at kitchen tables, and eventually organized small group meetings in living rooms throughout the community. The Johnsons from the corner lot, the Rodriguez family who received daily fines for their cultural garden, elderly Mr. Patel who Patricia publicly humiliated over holiday decorations. Initially reluctant to speak, they found collective courage through shared experience. Each meeting added new evidence, new witnesses, new allies to the growing coalition. She fined us $300 for having a medical ramp installed for my mother, Mrs. Johnson shared during one evening gathering. Called it an unauthorized structure despite our providing doctor documentation. Mr. Chen nodded in understanding. Our children were banned from the community pool last summer. Patricia claimed their excessive noise violated community standards. They were playing Marco Polo, just like every other child there. These testimonials built a comprehensive picture of systematic discrimination. Meanwhile, my colleague Detective Garcia provided valuable information about the HOA's financial structure. As a nonprofit organization, their records were legally accessible through proper channels. What we discovered raised serious questions about Patricia's financial management. $27,000 transferred from the general maintenance fund to a neighborhood aesthetic improvement account that only Patricia controls, Garcia explained, highlighting the suspicious transactions. No board approval documented for these transfers. The monthly HOA meeting became our D-Day. I spent the preceding week ensuring maximum community attendance through quiet word-of-mouth mobilization. The community room overflowed by the time Patricia called the meeting to order, her expression momentarily betraying surprise at the unprecedented turnout. The agenda proceeded normally until the open comments period. I approached the microphone, carrying a modest folder of documents. Those who knew me only as the quiet neighbor who kept to himself were about to meet Lieutenant James Marshall of the Police Tactical Response Unit. For those who do not know me beyond the quiet neighbor who tends his lawn and keeps to himself, I am Lieutenant James Marshall, 15 years with Police Tactical Response. My voice carried the quiet authority developed through countless crisis negotiations. Before addressing recent events, I want to thank those board members who supported the accessible playground equipment installation last year. Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair as I continued. Many of you witnessed what happened to my niece Sarah at that playground 2 weeks ago. For those who did not, Sarah had her hands nailed to the equipment by our HOA president, who claimed disabled children should not use regular playground facilities. Murmurs spread through the room. Patricia leaned toward her microphone. That matter is before the courts and is not appropriate for discussion at this meeting. I agree that the criminal assault charges are for the judicial system to address, I replied evenly. However, the pattern of discriminatory behavior and financial irregularities within our HOA are absolutely appropriate for community discussion. I methodically presented evidence of selective enforcement, side-by-side photographs showing identical violations, generating fines for minority homeowners while being ignored at properties belonging to Patricia's supporters. The testimonials followed, one resident after another describing harassment, intimidation, and discriminatory application of HOA regulations. Patricia's face registered the first flicker of comprehension. She had misjudged her opponent. When I revealed financial discrepancies discovered in HOA accounting, particularly the unauthorized discretionary fund Patricia had created, the room fell silent. These financial records indicate $27,000 transferred without proper board approval to accounts controlled solely by the president, I explained, distributing copies to board members. These transfers violate both HOA bylaws and potentially state regulations governing nonprofit organizations. As evidence mounted, something crumbled behind Patricia's eyes. The realization that her carefully constructed power structure faced professional dismantling. The community found its voice that night, sharing stories of intimidation previously suffered in silence. "My grandson uses a wheelchair," Mrs. Williamson stated shakily, rising from her seat. "Patricia told me he should remain inside when prospective buyers tour the neighborhood because visible disabilities lower property values. Is this who we want leading our community?" Board member Marcus Wilson, who had minimized Patricia's actions days earlier, now faced the collective outrage of his neighbors. "I move that we conduct a full financial audit and review of all enforcement actions taken during President Winter's tenure," he announced, visibly uncomfortable but responding to the shifting political winds. The motion passed unanimously. Patricia remained outwardly defiant, but her support evaporated like morning dew under harsh sunlight. As the meeting concluded, she approached me with forced composure. "You have no idea what you have started," she hissed, maintaining her public smile. "This community needs strong leadership to maintain standards." "What this community needs is justice and equal application of the rules," I replied calmly. "And unlike you, Patricia, I understand how to gather evidence and build an airtight case. The question is not whether your presidency survives, but whether your freedom does." The strategy unfolded exactly as planned, each element reinforcing the others. The emergency board meeting to review findings was scheduled for the following week. Phase 3 of the operation was about to begin, the systematic dismantling of Patricia Winter's power structure and the pursuit of comprehensive justice for everyone she had harmed. As the community room emptied, Sarah's therapist called with positive news. My niece had spoken her first complete sentence since the incident. Progress would come in small victories, both for Sarah and for our community. The emergency board meeting convened under storm clouds that mirrored the tension inside the community center. Every seat was filled, with additional residents standing along the walls. The HOA had never seen such attendance, a testament to how deeply Patricia's actions had affected our community. Patricia arrived flanked by two remaining supporters, her attorney conspicuously absent after reviewing the evidence we had compiled. She projected confidence in her designer suit and perfect makeup, but my tactical training revealed micro-expressions of panic, flared nostrils, tightened jaw, excessive blinking. These were the same stress indicators I observed in cornered suspects during tactical operations. Board member Marcus Wilson opened the proceedings. This emergency meeting will address allegations of discriminatory practices and financial irregularities under the current HOA leadership. Patricia's strategy became immediately clear as she seized the microphone. Discredit the accusers. Lieutenant Marshall has a personal vendetta against me. His disabled niece was damaging expensive equipment. Everyone here is conspiring because I enforce rules that maintain our property values. She produced photographs of minor playground where that predated Sarah's injury. This is the vandalism I was preventing. If some people cannot control their children, aisle needs or otherwise, the community suffers. The calculated use of special needs as a derogatory term caused visible discomfort among board members. I waited patiently, allowing her defensive barrage to exhaust itself. This was standard suspect behavior, an initial aggressive defense followed by escalating desperation as evidence mounted. When she finished, I approached the table and connected my laptop to the projector. Before addressing these claims, I believe the community should review the actual evidence. The room fell silent as security footage played. Patricia's unambiguous actions at the playground, her clear statements about keeping undesirables out of sight captured by a neighbor's security camera. The medical photographs of Sarah's injuries appeared next, causing audible gasps from those who had not witnessed the incident firsthand. These are not the actions of someone preventing vandalism, I stated calmly. These are the actions of someone who believed she could abuse a disabled child with impunity. I transitioned to financial records, highlighting $27,000 of unexplained transfers from HOA accounts to vendors connected to Patricia's personal renovation business. The community watched in stunned silence as the extent of the financial improprieties became clear. Patricia lunged toward the projection screen. Those records were private HOA business. Her composure cracked visibly, another predictable response I had anticipated. When suspects realize evidence is overwhelming, they often resort to claims of procedural impropriety. The doors opened as Detective Rodriguez from Financial Crimes entered with documentation in hand. Patricia Winters, we have questions regarding misappropriation of HOA funds. The timing was not coincidental. I had coordinated with the department to ensure maximum impact. Patricia's composure shattered completely. None of you understand what it takes to keep property values up. These people, these defects and foreigners, they ruin everything. Her words hung in shocked silence. The mask had fallen, revealing the prejudice that motivated her actions all along. Even her few remaining supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unwilling to associate with such naked bigotry. The formal vote proceeded, unanimous removal from HOA leadership. As Patricia was escorted out for questioning related to the financial improprieties, she turned to me with pure hatred. "You have no idea who you are dealing with." I maintained eye contact, my voice calm but firm. "Actually, I do, but you never understood who you were dealing with." The confrontation had unfolded exactly as planned. Patricia's removal from power, exposure of her discriminatory practices, and initiation of financial crime investigation. The legal case regarding Sarah's assault would proceed separately, but this community action represented a crucial step toward justice. As the meeting concluded, neighbors approached me with stories they had been too frightened to share previously. The Chen family revealed threatening notes left on their door. The Williamsons shared recordings of Patricia's late-night property inspections that bordered on stalking. Each testimony strengthened both the criminal and civil cases against her. The community board appointed an interim president, Mrs. Johnson, whose grandson used a wheelchair, and established a committee to review all fines and enforcement actions from Patricia's tenure. The systemic dismantling of her discriminatory framework had begun. Outside the community center, rain started falling, washing away the tension of confrontation. Detective Rodriguez confirmed Patricia would face formal questioning about the financial discrepancies. "This is just the beginning of her problems," he noted professionally. Sarah's journey toward healing would be longer and more complex, but this night represented a crucial milestone. The community had confronted its darkest elements and chosen a different path forward. As tactical operations went, this phase had achieved all primary objectives. Justice arrives through multiple channels over time. In the months following Patricia's removal from HOA leadership, the legal proceedings unfolded methodically. The criminal case regarding Sarah's assault concluded with Patricia pleading guilty to reduced charges of assault and unlawful restraint. Her attorney negotiated 18 months imprisonment plus substantial restitution. The separate financial crimes investigation resulted in additional penalties that would follow her for decades. Legal consequences represented only one dimension of resolution. True healing happened through community transformation. Under Mrs. Johnson's leadership, the HOA democratized its governance structure. New bylaws emphasized inclusion and accessibility, with clear language prohibiting discrimination based on disability, ethnicity, or family composition. Every enforcement action now required documentati, on and secondary review, to prevent selective application of rules. Most symbolically, the playground where Sarah suffered became a focus for redemption. The community voted unanimously to completely renovate the area with universal design principles, allowing children of all abilities to play together. The adaptive equipment integrated seamlessly with traditional structures, creating an inclusive environment rather than segregated spaces. Sarah's recovery progressed gradually. The physical wounds healed within weeks, leaving small scars that would fade with time. The psychological trauma proved more persistent. Nightmares disrupted her sleep. She refused to discuss the playground or visit any similar location. Her therapist worked patiently, using art and play therapy to process the trauma. 3 months after the incident, Sarah's therapist noted a significant breakthrough. During a session, Sarah voluntarily drew a picture of a playground with children of various abilities playing together. The following week, she asked to visit the newly renovated community playground, now just days away from its official reopening. "The bad lady cannot come back," she said, testing the smooth, accessible surfaces with cautious fingers. "Uncle made it safe now." Her simple statement captured the essence of what had been accomplished. Not just justice through courts and community action, but the restoration of safety and trust for the most vulnerable among us. The community strengthened through shared purpose. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now organized inclusive events. Former victims of discrimination became community leaders. The Rodriguez family expanded their cultural garden into a community education project. Mr. Patel led workshops on diverse holiday celebrations. The neighborhood transformed from fragmented individuals into a cohesive community united by shared values rather than property assessments. At the playground dedication ceremony, I wore civilian clothes rather than my tactical uniform, a conscious choice to separate my professional and personal roles. Sarah cut the ceremonial ribbon, her hands healed but her spirit still recovering. The applause from neighbors affirmed her place in the community, not as a victim, but as the catalyst for necessary change. This victory required both aspects of my identity: the disciplined officer who understands strategic patience and the protective uncle who recognizes worth beyond property values. As Sarah joined a diverse group of children exploring the new equipment, I recognized the most important tactical lesson. Communities defend themselves best when everyone feels valued. Patricia served her sentence and moved across the country upon release. The financial penalties and registered offender status would follow her, limiting her ability to hold positions of power over vulnerable populations again. The system had worked, albeit imperfectly, and only with substantial community pressure. But watching these children play together without fear, this represented the true victory. The playground echoed with laughter from children of all abilities and backgrounds. Sarah navigated the accessible equipment with growing confidence, occasional frustration giving way to determination. This case reminded me why I joined Tactical Response 15 years ago. Not just to neutralize immediate threats, but to protect communities from those who would harm their most vulnerable members. Some battles require tactical precision, others require heart.